what exactly is your ministry involved with?
Our ministry involved actually in every single field of the forming of agricultural policies in Ukrainian agricultural and food sector, and that means that definitely we are talking here not only about, let's say, policies on the agricultural land market, or I don't know, productivity, production or processing, but we're talking also about such things like export. We're talking about such things like foreign investments and our domestic investments, and we're talking about the new technologies, agricultural technologies, and development of these technologies, not only large but in small and medium-sized companies in agricultural sector.
Now, I saw that your profile was included in integration into Europe.
Yes.
Now, does this entail, as I assume, integration into like EU agricultural standards?
EU integrational processes, at least not only in agricultural sector but in general, means for us approximation towards the European standards in all spheres of life, also in agricultural sphere of life. So it doesn't mean 100% application of these all the regulations or whatever. Yeah. So it means that we are getting through the association agreement and through the DCFTA with the European Union closer this European business. Our agricultural and food producers are getting closer to the European consumers, for instance. That's very important for us. And as I said, at the state level, at the government level, it's really important for us to be reproached as for instance, food safety or food quality standards. And here we're again talking about some innovative decisions in these fields.
Now, you mentioned that you're moving towards an approximation.
Yep.
But why exactly an approximation as opposed to full compliance? Wouldn't full compliance lead to better integration or better trade prospects with the EU countries?
Here I'm quite practical, I must say. Yeah, we are talking about approximation because it is written so in an association agreement, and approximation is a first step. The full, let's say, full application of the EU systems, EU standards, or whatever. First of all, my personal opinion, by the way, that it's rather even impossible to transfer to 100% such kind of the regulations from one region or from one country to another. And I know that even the new member countries of European Union, yeah, it was for them also very complex and quite a long process, yeah, of implementation of all the EU regulations and standards, also in agriculture and food, and maybe especially in agriculture and food sectors. That's why we are talking here for the, let's say, for the beginning, about the approximation. This is the first thing. And another thing, or another, let's see, side of the coin, that I see Ukraine definitely as a global player in agricultural and food sectors. We are already, doing quite well globally and selling a lot of agricultural products worldwide. And I would like that Ukraine will still like this agricultural global player. That means that European Union will be very important partner for us. We will be maybe have even deeper economic integration within the European Union. I don't know, we can talk about custom union or any other form, but nevertheless, Ukraine will be on its own, let's say. Yeah. So the global player with many partners worldwide, starting with the United States and ending up, I don't know, with China and Japan or any other African country.
Now, you mentioned that it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to be fully compliant with EU regulations. Now, is this similar to the view, for example, during the Brexit campaign in the UK, one of the Leave campaign's arguments was that EU agricultural regulations in particular were so onerous that they were dampening the competitiveness of UK farmers. Is this a fear in Ukraine as we become more integrated with Europe, that maybe they really are too onerous, that we'll have trouble competing with, for example, Spain or France or whoever?
you've heard maybe today there are one of the opinions from the egg businesses from Ukraine. So where was said, and I completely agree with that, that we are now in a good position. We are now even more competitive comparing to European egg businesses because we are doing business here. We are not relying on such huge subsidies, state subsidies, as it is the case in European Union, and that's why our agribusiness is business-driven, is innovation-driven, and exactly maybe that's why agribusiness in Ukraine has made such a huge jump, as for the agricultural technologies implementation. As for the full compliance, as I said, it could be a very long process on the one hand, and on the other hand, if you are talking about the Brexit, we should, and we've been talking during our discussion panel today also about that. We don't know how exactly our world will look like in exactly in 10 or 20 years. So let's see.
Now, Ukraine was during the Soviet Union considered to be the breadbasket of Europe, or at least the breadbasket of the Soviet Union. And obviously, in the quarter century after, our fortunes have declined a little bit. But do you think that we finally reestablished ourselves on the road to once again becoming the breadbasket of the world and one of the agricultural centers of Europe?
I'm absolutely sure in that. And also this figure you already heard today during the discussion about panel that like 10 years ago we were talking about record yields, grain yields of 40-something million tons. Now we are already approaching 70 million tons, and I'm quite sure that in a couple of years we will be somewhere between 80 and 100 million tons of yield of grain yield in Ukraine. And that's again, it's not that's not a something like a barrier, there. If we will do at the same pace this agricultural technologies implementation as we're doing at the moment, I'm quite sure that we will be not only the grain basket of Europe, but grain and brain, by the way, basket of the world.
What are the biggest obstacles currently to expanding agriculture and integrating more into the global economy for Ukraine at the moment?
The main obstacles maybe, we still, if we're talking about the larger companies, we are already quite integrated in the international business communities and international business processes. But we have a lot of smaller and medium-sized companies, which are in some subsectors we are making like more than 50% maybe, of their total production, let's say, volumes of agricultural products. And for them, it should be a shift in mentality. It should be a shift in the business culture and how we are doing business. Because we were oriented even after the breakup of the Soviet Union very much to the east, to the former Soviet republics former Soviet republic markets. And now the situation is changing. It changed quite drastically maybe a couple of years ago, and due to that we see much stronger reorientation of our businesses westwards. So we are really starting not only large businesses but also smaller ones. We are looking for the trade partners. We are looking for new markets worldwide, not only eastwards from Ukraine.
Now to switch a little bit to a domestic focus. Would it be accurate to say that a lot of the domestic kind of agriculture and food markets operate in kind of a gray zone? For example, old women selling their own home brew products in stalls on the street. While I can see obviously the benefits that can bring to single household families or single landowning families, will there be a movement to kind of regulate the quality of such goods? Because obviously, while it's nice to buy fresh, fruit and produce from the source, there is exactly. There still seems to me to be a high risk of the food supply being contaminated unknowingly and then spreading out of control.
Yeah, that's right. But we already have a quite good system of controls even on such markets. Organized markets here, where the private persons are selling their products. So here is not everything so bad, but I would like to say, if we're talking about business, in business we have a much smaller part of the really businesses who are in a gray or in a black zone, let's say. Yeah? So if we are talking about these small private entrepreneurs, so and very small farmers, let's say under 100 hectares, yeah, here we should work further on it, and as again today was discussed, yeah, so we should really create such a business framework, such a legislative framework, also through this, by the way, state support, because it requires to go outside this black or gray zone. Yeah, so we should create it to encourage these smallest private enterprises, also in the rural areas, to go, let's say, in a legal, to be in the legal field then, yeah, to work in a legal field then.
Also, kind of domestically, our last season wasn't exactly the most fruitful, judging by a lot of people I spoke to, the inconsistent weather and so on.
Yeah.
Are there any steps the Ukrainian government is taking to kind of ensure or help mitigate some of the risk that we're seeing from these increasingly unreliant weather patterns?
Yeah. Risk management in general, as I've talked to our European colleagues also a couple of days ago, is getting more and more important in the agricultural sector worldwide, not only Ukraine. We see it because really there are weather conditions and climate peaks, yeah, they are getting bigger and bigger. And to tell the truth, my personal position here, it's rather the business, should be the business task. And we should maybe from the state side only create, again, such a legislative framework where we'll have a more reliable and more доступный.
Accessible?
Yeah, accessible, more accessible proposals, yeah, for our farmers, for agricultural producers, as for insurance of their risks in not only in crop production. Last case, for instance, we were discussed with our horticulture producers who also suffered a lot from their desert spring and during summer. But how could the system be changed? And they said that, for instance, they have already a couple of good proposals on the market as for their risk insurance, but it's not enough. Yeah, so it's a developing industry. It's still a development industry. From the state, I think maybe only partially could be it could be covered, but it's clear that a state cannot be involved to 100% into the insurance of their risks in agricultural production. It's impossible.
I understand. Well, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure to speak to you.
Thanks.